Hi, I'm Seamless, and this is another How to Synth tutorial, and today I'm going to show you how to make this sound. This is going to be such a long video. Okay, let's get ready for this. So, this is us doing string synthesis. What are we doing? What is this built of? So, there's a couple, bunch of different, versions of them, but there are two primary ones. And I'm not even done yet. As you might have noticed, I didn't do a lot of the more complicated articulations. And I'm getting very, very close to figuring out a total model for this. And this, I actually had to consider some seriously serious stuff to figure just how to get this far. And a lot of this was still mostly just accidents. So let's look at it. So it's Sytrus, it's into convolvers, into more convolvers, into they got this mix to go into a room up here. The sort of the construction idea for making these is I'm making like a string thing, and then it's being ring modulated, which is representing the action imparted onto it by the bow. And then there's a bunch of phase motion, which is also related to the action imparted onto the bow. And this gets us the string information. And then with the string information, we can then put it into a resonant body. This can be done a number of ways. In this case, this is an impulse, the desk one. What is this? I think it's in a special effects, maybe. But I've noticed so far, and I've done more than just this, that like woody sounding things that basically sound like you just like knocked a violin would make the perfect resonant bodies for this. And not having that, the other way to do it is to do it manually, which is what this version is. So I have a high version and a low version. I'm not as happy with the high version as I am the low version, but I did know more about the high version when I did it. This is one I was trying to be just a little bit more synthetic about it, and by that I mean I'm doing the resonant body with an actual manual delay. And here's something funny: the minimum time of delay for the regular delay unit is 1 millisecond, which is a problem because if you think about how long a millisecond is in space, we talk about latency a lot. We talk about how 1 millisecond is equal to being a foot away from the cone of your speaker. So 10 milliseconds is as though you were 10 feet away from your speaker, and that kind of thing. So if I'm trying to come up with a resonant body, I'm imagining a space wherein there's a time for something to bounce around. And I'm thinking of like a violin. It's not a very big thing. That's probably about like a foot to a square foot, like square and a half foot total. Like, and then the small ones, the big ones, you get a little bit bigger and that kind of thing. But the point is that that's the size calculation. You take that, put that in milliseconds, but this can only go down to 1 millisecond. And why is that a problem? Well, on top of just the overall size of the object, there's also just the intricacies. The coolnesses and the angles of like an actual like piece of wood is about there being different sizes that reflect on each other, so different reflections, and it just means having more than one delay, and just different speeds and whatnot. So to get around the limitations of the delay, what I am doing is I am using a comb filter inside the Destructor plugin. Comb filters are just what delays are, and when you do real low values, real high resonance, you can just hear them be delays. So this is how we essentially use a much higher speed delay to get kind of resonance, like to do a thing here. And then this is also just going into a kind of a room thing. This was me trying to be standalone outside of this other guy. So this other guy is so far the most successful one I've done. And you can tell which one this is. It's this one. Now let's actually get one of the patterns that works. So this is a layer. Oops, this is a layer. This is two of them. And like the brass thing about how I was using the colors because I needed filter articulation to be a per voice experience, that's still true for this. It just made it a lot easier to make them separate things instead of trying to do that like that. Oops. So what I was trying to show here, what is happening? Oh, right, I set there it is. So when I first got this far into making the thing, this is the one that came out the best, and it's a little bit jank, but it does embody a couple of things that I did manage to do right, some on accident, some on purpose. The main element is this idea of incredible phase just mess, and it has to do with taking apart physically to model what an entire violin does. Get ready for this, because I had to explain this for any of this to make sense. Yeah, because the actual like step putting this together is not that complicated. It's just you make a saw-ish shape. You know what? I'm just gonna do a new one. Doop. You start with a saw, and just for fun, like I don't really have a reason for why this works, but I like to do kind of one of these, and then this creates a kind of wall of mess. It's 4 octaves of saws, but they're phased together, they create a unique shape here. And then I'm going to convert that shape into sine harmonics, and then I'm going to randomize the phases of these sine harmonics. And then I'm going to kind of arbitrarily flatten the low end, and you'll see our shape cohesion kind of returns. Where the most power is in these lower fundamentals means that if I make them phase cohesive, even if the rest of them aren't, I'll still have that smoothish shape like feeling, but I'll also have the result of it being the sharp I need. If I actually, yeah. Now after that, we want to create a kind of like the bowish experience, and this is more than just volume, although volume is involved. But the first step I go for here is to do basically another one of these. Do another saw, another one of these, another mess. And now, when you modulate phase, it'll get you kind of a lot, but in small, actually targeted portions. It starts to pull on it, and then we can start to make some serious choices to turn this into something that's actually usable. So there's two big ones. I mean, the first one is you just put some oomph on the volume. And you know something, I'm actually gonna do this shape again, but I'm gonna get something more like noticeably saw-ish out of it. Yeah. Bam. Bam. Neat. All right. Now, after that, the primary thing that separates a string experience from a brass experience is that the brass is usually just an articulation of a low pass, and a string is an articulation of a high pass. There's reasons for that. We're going to get into it. It's about to happen. But let's talk doing it, though. So in getting it to work, you go to your cutoff, and you put a big angle down. When you start getting that kind of AU5E experience, that's how you know you're actually getting on kind of the right step. At this point, we're not actually we're not trying to make a thing sound terribly realistic, because what we want is to make a signal that's going to behave well inside a resonant body. And there's a few things about the signal that we have to prepare to make it do things that we expect a real instrument to, based on what happens when we do stuff with a real instrument. And the big list of stuff that actually got done is like lists of phase change and everything, and like FM, and then also FM change, and then also more FM change. Now, the extra FM is another important bit, because what this is keeping track of is the width of a string. Because when you have a harmonic quality created by a string when you pluck it, and then you fret the string and pluck it again, you're still plucking the same medium, so you get the same harmonic result. But because you're changing the note of it, you form and shift it. But the qualities are still there, so you increase your note and it spreads out. So what it means is that the twangish quality of the string stays exactly in the same spot. The problem with this, though, is that if a whole string instrument has more than one string, explicitly because you can't get the whole range of tone you want out of just a string. And that's actually a big problem for the synthesis, because the reason why brass could work is because a brass instrument pretty much is a string. It's just a big continuous pipe, and when you put valves on it, you're just fretting the pipe. And there's only one. So that means that one big continuous up and down thing is a possibility. But for strings, this is a bit of a problem. So you might notice, like, this low end actually sounds pretty real. You know, when it's dying and drowning in reverb, but that's, you know, how you're going to use these things. It's, yeah, right. So if I keep going up the spectrum, though, it starts to fall apart. But like right around here, like I've heard samples that sound like that. Like the reason this is happening, though, is because there's basically 2 octaves of usable range on a string. If you look at a string and you look at like a fretting on a guitar or whatever, it goes all the way up to 24 frets, and then it's just where you pluck, and then it terminates where the string is like mounted. That's what the string architecture is. So if I just keep playing up on this synthesis, what that means is I'm just keep playing up the string. And I can exceed the 2 octave range if I twiddle some parameters, and I did, because I am really only using 2 of these. I'm using this guy and then a high targeted one. This one is basically the same idea, but it doesn't work so well on the low end. It's a bit busted. But it's targeted to work more on the high end. And this is done, it's still the same basic idea. It's like it's all the mess, it's all the bowing. It's just one voice, though, because I figured out what I'm doing, like to do it on purpose in this moment. And I'm accounting, I'm doing, like, this is one particularly clever moment in a sea of trial and error, which is that I'm doing that bit with the secondary FM, but I'm using the modulator to FM itself to cause that effect, which is working. Wow, who'd have thought? We have our high pass and our low pass doing that deal. So the low pass after the fact is that you play higher notes, and real instruments just don't have perfect fidelity on all of their business, no matter how good they are. And so if they do, if you make one that does, it sounds wrong. That's just what that's there for. It's tracked, key tracked, like, oh, so many things are key tracked and velocity tracked, and everything has got an envelope and everything moves with it. And like this is also a big part of it, like just playing the note. Like, this is a very hard thing to play. I don't know if you noticed in the MIDI, but just about nothing is on the grid. And it's because everything has real special timing on the thing. And like, if you're a piano player, if you're a violinist or a string player of that kind, of that caliber, you do this. You pre-play notes, you into things, and you have to write like that. And it's a pain in the ass. But it makes real good results if you get it to actually, like, you know, get your have a sound that like can react properly to it. Speaking of more reactions, there's a lot of randomness going on a phase, just to make sure that there's like you might notice that there's no noise anywhere. Isn't that interesting? The majority of that sound effect is just straight up phase motion. And like, there's this scratchy dude up here, but I don't even think I'm doing a whole lot of it. Phase is moving in key, but it's not being bowed. There's phase being bowed all up and down, and this is what is getting the texture to do it. And like, how fast it does it is a part of it doing it. So like, here's a good example. This dude here, if I get him down here, it kind of flattens out, and now it's big and poofy again. That's the whole thing. That's the whole bag. I thought I'd have to get all special with noise and stuff. I hate using noise. You know how much I hate using noise, but nope. Turns out it's all just physical procedural reality of a violin. So let's talk about the theories and the planning that led us here and what I'm going to have to do in future projects to make this even better. And to do this, we're going to break out freaking MS Paint so that I can show you things with visual aids. All right, so when you have your violin and you have your fretboard and your head, whatever, and you have your resonant body resonating, why not? Yay. This is bad looking, weird Music Man looking violin, but point is, here's your string. Maybe do this in a different color. Yeah. So, the string has snap up here and up here. That's where it's held, and then it has the frets where you hold it, and then there's where you bow it. These are the things that we have to care all about to make this a thing that makes sense. When we're talking about the string itself, making the real choices that I took away from it were mostly just the choice to have a lot of high frequency fidelity, which is just a thing about metal. But then it got complicated when I had to start thinking about what the hell a bow is and what it does. And what the thing that led me to know that a high pass filter is the thing that makes a string sound like a string is actually basically just what happens when you have a bow make contact with a string. So imagine this is our string, like zoomed in, looking at it. Here's the core, it's all looped up and whatever. And here comes our bow. And the bow, it's a collection of fibers that are all loosely like integrated, kind of just mooshed up into this vaguely kind of semicircle configuration that like can get pushed up and down on objects. And when that happens, the shape of the thing changes. And on the outside of it are a bunch of these loose fibers that like aren't being in the bunch and are crunched together. And then when the thing gets pushed down, contact is made. And before the shape is changed, there's a little bit of loose, high frequency contact that doesn't have enough power to drive enough resonance to be heard about anything other than the highest frequencies. So that means that we hear things high frequency first when it comes to strings. At least if you're a bad player. Intonation and playing on a violin as a physical skill is about honestly in real time phase correcting shit. It's kind of badass. When you bow up your position on here, what's happening is you're creating a period like waveform length, and then when you fret a new position, the wavelength changes, but certain other elements do not. There's no other thing. Yeah. So the thing here, in this note on this string, there's this length of waveform, and then here is where the pulse width changes. And then when you fret of again, this pulse width does not change, but this one does. And that's a pulse width change all the way up and down. Now, I am not actually doing this the way that I should be doing. I figured out a way how you can. It's actually pretty basic. If you phase cancel a signal against itself, you can create a pulsed width version of it. And that's all well and good. But it's a bit hard to do that and do it like with the, I got to figure out ways to get all the rest of the stuff to work in the way I want it to get to the level that you just heard and also get the improvement that you would get at being this realistic. But that, this is the consideration I got for phase change. Like every time a fret hits, you have to change the phase of the thing. But a whole lot of other qualities there's really a formant shift happening. You can kind of hear it when you hear it, like there's a vaguely kind of talky nature in stringed instruments and formants. When it goes back to the bow, the way that the progression goes is that as it keeps coming down, eventually this coalesces into a solid shape, an actual like it's all the bits are all together. And then it grabs the string and it does the, like, if you ever like wet your thumb up and like drag it across the table and have it bounce around, like it causes resonance that it grabs friction, loses friction, grabs friction, loses friction at a rate. And then depending on the amount of power you put in is the amount of like, is it gonna like, it's gonna resonate. And also the body and the energy. It's all this big old like resonance thing. But the resonance is created by the bow that's crunching up together all the stuff so that like it can grab all the granules of the metal by essentially like ring modulating it with many independent voices. So the way that I look at this is I think of a bow as a collection, as a series of tubes. Well, I guess not a series. It's a collection of these tube items that are essentially like one voice that's rubbing up against the string, and then here they all are together rubbing up against the string. And when you move the bow back and forth, this is kind of like you can imagine there being like a noise map. And when the bow moves back and forth, there's going to be a change, but this change has to be regular. As in when the bow junks up and comes back and does it again, it has to not be completely different. It has to have a behavior that, like, when you do a lot of these repeated like fast things, you can get a behavior out of it that's like regular. Like, for example, there's that like that I'm able to get out of a note that's playing because I've been working with the thing long enough to know how long its attack is. Is a quality of caring a lot about the shape of this element. And this is the ring modulator source I'm talking about. Essentially, like that's what I said before about like this is approximating the bow's like impartive energy. It's about taking this idea of this sort of like essentially voice collection consideration of a bow, and then how it applies itself to a string. This is string. Let's actually keep going this way. It's a lateral view, but yeah, good job being visibly sound. Yeah, so we want to care about all of those qualities when we're doing all these things, and that's what I try to keep track of when designing this thing. And wow, the results got pretty freaking far, just considering for that. Like, and I didn't get even as special as I assumed I would have to. I was mentioning in the brass video that I would probably look up doing things with phase plant. I haven't tried doing vital yet, but I actually have tried doing phase plant, and it's not actually easier. I don't know if it's because faceplant actually doesn't go so hard or if the aliasing really gets to it, but that Sytrus is just, I don't know, I'm just used to Sytrus, is probably more what that is. But I expected I would have to get real special with things like filter FM and whatnot to really mimic the quality, especially of the whole resonant body concept. So like, let's talk about that for a second, right? All right, so on top of we're doing this thing with the bow and the string, after that, like the thing that there's this idea of the resonant body that's resonating as a result of this action that we're talking about. So I tried to come up with a model for this. That's this idea of there's a thing that you hear, and so there's this idea of the phase cancellation action. So like you have a waveform. Yeah, that's totally a waveform. You have a waveform, and then you have another waveform that's the opposite. Yeah, let's pretend that's the opposite. And if they are exactly the same, but then you FM one of them, then what you'll end up hearing is only the change between them. And that's a little bit like what like a physically static, like just a string is. If it's not doing anything, it's just equilibrium, all forces are equal, and it's fine, it's there, and it's canceled. But then you impart action onto it with a string, and then now you're hearing the phase. Like there's a model out there called Car Plus Strong. It's about this idea that like, oh, it's all actually just phase like manipulation, and why not just do that? But I did try to go there, but that's an electrical circuit thing and doesn't totally work with what I have available. Yeah, at least I don't really want to get into actually programming just yet, but the sort of the nitty gritty of it is you're going to have a high frequency source modulated by a somewhat softer high frequency source that's very unisonly malleable, lots of voice action, lots of incoherence, but samey. And then all of that is going to get imparted into like a wooden experience. And then we have to care about the difference between metal and wood. So metal is rigid, which means that it has, if we zoomed in on like a microscopic piece of metal, what we would see is that the surface is actually crazy jagged and ridiculously like fine and sharp. And then if we were to look up like a piece of wood, same experience, what we would see is the somewhat like softer, rounder, like not super dense kind of experience. And what happens is that when this vibrates, these structures are so strong that they stay there and they vibrate the air the shape of themselves, which is very high frequency. So you get very high frequency action in the air. This is so soft that anything that would be that sharp just shakes right off and he keeps it round. because it's not hard enough to remain that solid. What that means is when high frequency, high power, high energy waveforms get put into something that doesn't deal with it well, the resonance happens, but also a low pass happens. And that's the part where I thought that this would have to be filter FM, that I would have to come up with a shape like that, like matches wood. And this is where the resonant, like I just put a thing in a convolver. It's actually exactly what happened. It's just what it does. And it kind of helps that out like incredibly well. It's not really a filter FM, but like that was where I went first. So then essentially it's just suit these two phase cancel, like whatever source you got going on, like being one of them is going to be RM'd by then like the guy with a little bit of FM. That's what this sort of new high one was doing. The combo that's there now is a bit specific. Oh yeah, and then there's the string width consideration. So what happens when one string is longer than the other? Well, it gets pinched. I keep calling it the twang, but really what it is that actually we don't need this to show that. Where's the new Sytrus that I opened? So if this is a length of string A, like a width A, if a string is thinner than this, what it'll appear is like that. It'll up like this. And this, you can just straight up just FM a thing like this with this, and it'll essentially do the thinner stringed version of it. And this is super important because of all that string stuff I said before. Like if you've ever had to deal with guitar tones, it's paramount. Like your string thickness is almost the whole bag, because it's a display of where the harmonic energy is, and therefore what you're going to be able to work with. And if you're trying to mimic that, you need to have that action present one way or another to kind of put that through. We still do that for brass instruments, but it doesn't change. It's just the quality of the element that makes it sound the way it is. Every brass instrument just has a specific thickness, a specific dimension, and that's the shape of it put on it. But specifically, the increase from string to string, if the thickness is changing, is this pinchy kind of FM thing. And that there's a lot of that going on in here. So all of this automation, by the way, every single one of these is just to control the attack and release of the audio. Like, and it's all like this guy has volume here, volume here, volume here. I think it's also, yeah. So the phase is matching, and also the high pass is matching. That was a test I did for this because the other guy wasn't. The other guy is independent completely. There's just a bunch of action, and it's just timed away, and then it's just the way it is. And then I got stuck. That's why one of the reasons I had to start again is because I was realizing, oh, I have to actually marry all of these parameters because they're all related. And if I want it to feel and sound right, it has to always be that way at all speeds that they play. Wow. There's like 70 parameters to make this work, but I can see it. I can see the end of this. Where I have I just did pretty good, just synthesized just a preset of some stuff happening. Like I can see that happening. I've independently controlled the things I want to control. I just have to figure out how to get them all going at once. But so far I'm pretty pleased with this progress. And if you want to mess around with it, this FLP will be available in the description of this video. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and all that fun stuff. And as usual, have a nice day. Yeah, this is so much fun.